I guess, do you want to talk a little bit about your childhood? I think you already mentioned a little bit, but kind of want you to talk about what your earliest calling was like, um, why you were called to be a social worker, a helper of women. You said you made a cross in preschool in your book. Was that really important to you?
It was actually right after I got confirmed,
Yeah.
and I was in, public middle school and making ceramics in my art class. So I mimicked the cross that was in my Catholic church, and I can't say I got an A on it, but um, one of the things my art teacher pointed out to me was I went up to this girl that came into my class, and she looked very beat up and lost. So I don't know what her situation was exactly, but I just befriended her, and my art teacher told me that was a good thing.
So, someone you had no idea what was wrong with them, but you could sense they needed charity, and you know, for what just provided them, I don't know, conversation.
Yep.
Would you say that was your earliest calling, or that was your
That was
calling?
my calling in charity, I would say. Um, Around that same time, I was in public school, but I had a group of fundamentalists that would ask me, "Are you saved?" And I said, "What's that?" Because I'm Catholic. And they had their little Bibles. I went home and got my 3-inch Catholic Bible and brought that into school. So that was kind of the defending my faith kind of thing.
I guess was the reason you started Baby's Breath to be a Catholic organization?
Initially, well, the Saint Therese was our patron saint, so I wanted to have it respect Catholic values. So in our mission and charter, all our volunteers have to agree to support the Catholic church teachings on contraception. We don't have them run through our CIA here. If they want to become Catholic, they can, go and receive the instructions at their local church.
Okay, so not forcing anyone to convert, but giving people rules to work by.
It's the common thread. This is like kind of pulling from my history. Um, I think the formation that God gave me was pulling the common things between the Catholic faith and the Protestant faith are the lifestyle issues that if they are truly Bible Catholics, we're on the same page.
And then growing up, probably pre Roe v. Wade, you talked to us as children that you had a pretty casual, go free, happy childhood.
I loved my childhood. I had a big gang of kids to play, kick the can with, and there was 17 kids at my bus stop. I just loved elementary school and part of my junior high. But when my parents got divorced when I was 15, things kind of went south in my home.
Yeah, and I was going to say, ask before your parents split. I think Roe v. Wade was January 22nd, 1972. So you would have been 11.
Yeah, I remember it passing. I remember not a whole lot of talk about it, at home. I was just horrified the thought that a mother would kill her unborn child. It was just mind blowing.
For people my generation and younger, what was abortion talked about so readily back then? I mean, obviously not. But what was when you heard about it? What was people's reaction?
Well, I think it was just not talked about in my house. It was just something that it happened. Nothing changed politically in my parents' political beliefs. So
When did you start noticing it
I started
affecting?
noticing it when some of my friends started having abortions. And then a really close friend had hers. Then I was working with a colleague, and she just matter of factly told the whole group at lunch that she was 4 months pregnant, and she went ahead and had the baby aborted because it had Downs or some issue. It was just mind blowing that this was like within the span of 10 years. This discussion became prominent in my social circle and business circles.
What was the rhetoric like back then? What were they saying about abortion being okay? Because they'll
My
say
body, my choice.
they've been saying that
mantra.
since then.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
well, because you look at other progressive stuff. You talk about back then you had rainbow flags. It's just make people free to do what they want, and now it's tilted towards a whole nother.
Well, it began, I think, 5 years earlier when contraception became legalized. That happened first. So then, it was like at the tail end of the sexual revolution in the 60s, and then it just carried forward. So I found a lot of this stuff out after the fact, after becoming pro-life active, the evolution of things. But Humana Vitae was written in the 60s. It was rejected by a lot of church priests and bishops.
Yeah.
And then
Paul VI, that was his last encyclical he wrote because it wasn't very popular to the congregation he was with, which was shocking. He wrote quite a few before that.
So my guiding truth source has been the Humana, the Gospel of Life by John Paul II, Pope John Paul II, which goes into detail the correlation, how contraception is the root of abortion. Because if a woman has an abortion while she's under contraception, she has the excuse, well, I wasn't planning it. It's not my fault. It was, baby just came, and so abortion became the backup contraception.
Yeah, and you've mentioned some pro-life organizations not taking that stance for contraception.
It's the dividing rod between many pro-life organizations that refuse to see the corollary. But there's not a single crisis client that we've had that's not been on some form of contraception.
Wow. And then I guess looking at the effects after your parents' divorce, how did that affect your relationship with God?
Well, my dad, who was very much, contributed, I would say, to the divorce, also showed me how to get back to my Catholic faith. He showed me by example 2 weeks after my grandmom left, going back to church, going back to the sacrament of reconciliation, and bearing the wounds of that situation. It was heartbreaking to watch my dad go through that.
Were you the only sibling dealing with it? How was your other family members?
My older sister was moved out. My older brother, your Uncle John, was in the service. So it was just my dad and I at home from the time I was 15.
And then you had made some mistakes apparently along the way before coming back to God. I guess what eventually brought you back to God?
I always say your older brother. No, we're skipping over the fact that I married when I was 22, and it was a giant mistake. If I had some support at home, I probably wouldn't have married him, but it was a disaster of a marriage. And after 3 years, I left. And then I didn't start dating your dad till after I firmly made up my mind to leave. but we didn't get right with God until I had my annulment. So we didn't try and receive the sacrament until the annulment came through. And then we wanted to get married in the Catholic Church and gave up on a deposit in a Protestant church to do that. We had a good priest who we approached and said we'd like to be married, and he had the best advice for us, which was separate bedrooms. And so we had obeyed that directive. And I don't think God would have given me the blessing of starting this organization if I hadn't done that.
So you were living, you were cohabitating with Dad at the time. What did that affect? How does that affect your relationship now? I guess
There's wounds. There's definitely wounds that have taken their toll in forgiving your dad, forgiving each other, forgiving yourself. And I have to say, Jared, that you are, you've kind of been a blessing in getting married the right way.
I appreciate the nod. I just want to kind of make it a point, because you make it a point in your independence program that, you should strive to live the Christian life and not cut any corners. And it seems like the one that Catholics cut the corners the most is the cohabitation.
Yes.
Because it's so common.
I want to encourage any priest that hesitates to tell a couple to live the truth, no matter what.
Yeah. And the truth will set you free.
Mm-hmm.
So then you came back to faith. Obviously, a priest stepped in your life and told you what to do, told you the truth. And then once Josh was born, how did that experience affect how you feel about abortion clients, abortion women?
The first look I had at him, looking in his beautiful eyes and just seeing the love, I just thought about my friends who had aborted, and they would never have that first look at their baby. It was devastating. It was motivating for me to start this organization.
Is that when the calling became a resounding ring in your ear you couldn't ignore?
Absolutely. I quit my job, went on one income, and haven't been back since. This is going to be 30 years.
So you haven't accepted much of a paying job since?
I tried. But by the grace of God, your dad made enough money for us to survive on. It wasn't easy putting 4 kids through private Catholic school and college, but it was well worth it.
Yeah. I never felt deprived of a childhood, so that's nice. So then what do you say to those, people who make their own careers? Maybe they put that career versus being a mother. Is that, in a sense, also a little bit of a, it's not anywhere as serious as an abortion, but that denial of motherhood? How do you tell those people, don't deny yourself that?
All I can say is I don't regret 1 minute spent with my kids. That's all I'll say, because there have been, especially if you're a single mom, you have to work. At least till, if you do get remarried and find another provider, you are destined to work. So it's not impossible to do. It's just more challenging, which is why we offer so many supports for single moms and dads.
Okay. So I guess if you want to look back over the 24 history of A Baby's Breath, is it a resounding success for you? Does it feel like a mixed bag, or does it meet the goals that you set out to put forth?
God will have to judge me on the success of things, but I do know that I remain faithful, and think the biggest blessing that I have is my 4 kids who all attend Mass.
Really?
And
Yeah, that's
you got married in the church. That's the reward I have. So, this organization is just an opportunity for mothers, fathers, and families to choose life, and be supported.
were there any challenges in this running of this organization that people who want to start their own organization, what would they have to think about?
Well, I've given some major tips. One is to compartmentalize your life, for sure. And the prayer life is key. You have to be every day praying. I used to hold an hour of adoration once a week, which was really helpful. Go to as many masses as you can. Read scripture, devotions, anything that you can to keep your grace up would be good. Suggestion I'd have.
Has there been anything particular of a devotion that's helped you with keeping your grace up?
The rosary.
The rosary, yeah. A good one. How many are you saying a day now?
I say 4 a day.
Why is
one
that?
for each child.
Oh. God rest our grandmom, who used to say 3 for my dad and her 2 children, 2 other daughters. I think that's where you got the idea.
Yep.
And then, what fruits do you feel like you've been able to harvest from your organization? Because a good organization, there's something to be said about what it produces. What would you say is the fruits of your organization?
Fruits are teaching the path to heaven, which is you have to live a life that is compatible with God's grace.
Do you feel it's sort of a unappreciated position where you don't know if people who come in crisis and leave, if their life is truly helped or not? Or do you get to see that instant gratification?
It's not instant gratification, for sure. And I don't feel compelled to ask someone coming through a crisis pregnancy to fill out a Google review. So it's really a journey. And I can't imagine going through parenting without your dad. So that's, again, one of the reasons why we have the services that we do.
Mm-hmm. Does your family help validate your fruits?
Sometimes.
That's good.
No, I think that seeing my kids grow up to reflect their faith, our Catholic faith, has been the biggest reward that I can think of.
It's, in a sense, it's sheltered from any past mistakes you could have made, because they haven't become your children's mistakes.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think you've talked about some advocates, they have pro-life intentions, but they maybe enforce it on their kids too harshly.
Yes.
And then their kids end up within a crisis of themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess, do you want to talk about some of your more famous crises?
Sure.
How about your first one?
So we started our organization on August 15th, and 9 months to the date almost, on Holy Thursday, the phone rang at 5 o'clock, and we were still in Fairview Village. So I called up our most experienced advocate, because I certainly was not. And she met the client with her girlfriend at the center. And the mother in crisis was living in a house of prostitution. And the advocate wanted to show her graphic pictures of an abortion, and I wouldn't let her.
Yeah.
So she was searching online for whole babies, which, I think prayer and showing her whole babies was
I guess to me it's baffling because you wouldn't expect someone, someone who's lesbian to be in that state of grace to say, well, I want to save my life, the life that's within me.
Mm-hmm.
So does that person have I don't know, what an internal grace that guides them, and what do you say that nurtures that? Because it's really,
I do believe it's a grace from God that allows you to make the choice for life. Yeah.
and then you're just there to affirm them.
Support them, let them know they're not alone. They see like a room full of baby items that they can take care of their baby, and you're giving them hope and encouragement in the time when they're deciding to choose life.
So that one was your first. Was it a save for you guys?
Yes.
Awesome, good. And then I think you've mentioned a couple ones that were post-abortive that come in and say, "Well, I've already aborted one. I don't think I can save this one either."
That's a thing where it becomes, if they don't have a healing after the first one, their chances of having the second abortion are much higher.
Those tend to be low save rates.
Mm-hmm.
Talked about the Memorial Day one being the husband really wanted this child. The boyfriend, sorry.
Yeah.
So not in a whole union, but someone who wanted to take over paternity of this child for the second pregnancy, it sounded like. And
she wouldn't let him because she didn't want her body that, was perfect to be destroyed or whatever, hurt by the pregnancy.
So some people have maybe they're guided along to make the right decision, but at the end they choose to end life.
She was very much under some sort of influence, I felt, because she was allowing the father to see the baby on the ultrasound, but she was not going to choose life. And so
even the ultrasound wasn't enough to make her.
No.
And then I guess what is the main demographic of your? I guess I don't know. What is the main selection of crises that come through? Is it single mothers? Is it high school children from parents that are broken? Is it
single, for sure, is the majority. But we have had some married clients who are considering abortion.
Married couples consider it?
Yeah. That's not the majority though, and certainly not the majority to have teen pregnancies. Yeah.
Any relatively wealthy people you would
come from all demographics. It all depends on their support system at home. If they are going to support life, the mother typically chooses life. But if they're advocating to have an abortion, typically it won't fare well.
Do you ever get to work directly with clients' parents or significant others that would be able to win them over to saving lives?
We invite the clients to bring their parents if they haven't told them yet. They can bring them to the center. So we're there, and they can, maybe the reaction's not going to be as stark.
It's it keeps everyone level-headed because they're in front of somebody else, or
yeah. And a lot of times when they see that their child is making adult decisions to get through it, that's kind of like the affirmation for the parents of the crisis client to accept it. If they see the child is taking responsibility, she's got a plan, she's going to get through school, it's very affirming to the parents of the client in helping them support.
You talked about there being a client that was homeschooled or planned on homeschooling their child.
There was a client She was 13 years old, and the mother worked at Burger King,
Wow.
and she wanted to homeschool.
Was she able to?
No.
Okay.
No. So this is like the reality check. When they come to get the common sense applied to their plans. Like, how much money do you think your life costs? What budget do you need to afford choosing life? And then work from there, from their budget to what jobs do you think can accommodate this budget?
How do you tell a single mother that maybe for good reason wants to homeschool their child, but physically, mentally cannot give them that resource? Is there other sources that they could go, or is that something to think about?
I would have to say, for a homeschooling single mom that doesn't have any other resources, like she's basically, the sole provider of the family, to consider homeschooling is ridiculous. Unless she's going to latchkey the child in and do virtual, but I don't recommend that, because then the minor child typically is left unsupervised with a baby. It's just not a good scenario.
And then you get another potential crisis because that neglect leads to crises.
Yep.
And then there was advocates that came to help the organization, but then they ended up having crises of their own.
Right. Well, one of the things we look for on a volunteer brochure application is, do they have a job? Do they have a permanent place to live? Do they have, the support mechanisms that can teach our clients how to navigate through their crises? So sometimes, college students can be a good resource in showing the organizational skills they're using to apply to the crisis client. But, we have had situations where they're heading into a marriage and, the volunteers don't have a job, and, it is bewildering why they are signing up to be a volunteer when they themselves are in crisis until they get a job that can support a family. Because the fruit of a marriage is children. No surprise there, right? Even no contraception is 100%. So when you're getting married and you're going to have sexual relations, you should be expecting children.
Yeah. So they almost have a disconnect from the belief, or the professed opinion, or not opinion, belief, that you should not do these things for not just the sake of your own self, but to not dissuade the organization, not be part of the organization that can't run itself.
I just feel that we have a very non-judgmental environment. So that's why we have post-abortive volunteers, and we have volunteers that probably could use our help as well. And that is the challenge, to figure out where that line is.
I guess what I was trying to verbalize was, you'll have some advocates that will say, yeah, I agree with 90% of what a baby's breath says, but I'm still going to do the 10% that I think is correct. And then,
right. Well, where else are they going to hear about this type of, language, if they've lived outside their faith for any length of time, and they're coming back into it? Where else are they going to hear the truth about Christian lifestyle? So we're not magisterium, but we're upholding the church teachings on the magisterium.
And then, I guess, what kind of advocate does the best job, would you say?
Someone who's not non-judgmental, that can look at someone who's made some mistakes and look at them like they are the face of Jesus and help them.
Was someone an advocate for you in your life?
I had a very good therapist before starting A Baby's Breath after my first marriage broke up. And he taught me how therapy can be a help in allowing me to unload a lot of anger, because that is a very destructive force. And getting over the anger, that's a lot of times what our advocates are doing, just allowing them to share the burden of their crisis pregnancy.
Do they come angry or do they come feeling hopeless?
They don't know how angry they are, but it comes from like having the father of their children be so inept that they can't help one bit towards the support of the child. It's so much more than a love thing. Love is an action word. That you have the ability to make the sacrifices needed to provide for a child.
So people with less support, they need to verbalize what anger is really built up in there from feeling like you're all by yourself. Makes sense. You think, woe is me, but you also don't recognize, people have neglected you if you're in a crisis pregnancy. So that's pretty interesting. And I guess, how do you feel Tom does as being an advocate?
He's awesome. Many clients have not ever had a male treat them respectfully. So Tom is, very compassionate and hears their stories and doesn't judge them, and then wants to help them, provides the resources they need to pull themselves out.
Was it your goal ever in A Baby's Breath to have, say, seminarians or priests be advocates?
We did have seminarians come and learn our approach to helping, and it was a very fruitful experience teaching them my personal side of things, how they should support truth in their ministry.
And what truth is it what gives it the most efficacy to express? Specifically, what truth can you tell someone in crisis that really has good sound in their hearts?
Just along the lines of Christian truth, there is charity. So telling someone they shouldn't be living together is an act of a charity. It might not seem that way. It might seem like you should just allow them, accompany them in whatever situation they're living in. But that's really not truth or charity. I'm sorry, it is truth.
To not tell someone the full truth.
Yeah.
To give them the law and then the way to redeem and to be loved. So, and I guess you don't work within the church, but you work to speak as the church, or we
uphold church's teaching. So if someone is not married and they're with the father and it's a good relationship from what they say, then we might say, well, why don't you get married? And we've had situations where they have gone on to get married. We've had situations where it's not good. And then we advise them, if they're Catholic, to go back to confession. We have had Catholic crisis clients that we've encouraged their babies to get baptized.
That's nice.
So it's we're collaborators with the church in upholding the truth, but also pointing the way, the lifestyle that will be the path to heaven.